My first words are naturally to greet, to congratulate, and to thank my colleague from Brazil, Ambassador Jorge Monteiro Prata, and the Dean of the Faculty of Social Science of the Indonesian Islamic University, Dr. Philip Vermont, for this so interesting gathering. Thank you very much. You know, we diplomats, we are not academic, but when the opportunity is offered to us, we like to step in. And it was a very interesting topic to be talked about. And I think this kind of initiatives, in fact, they tell a lot with our world of diplomacy, because they put people together and more close and with more understand, without doubt. You know, in your very interesting and erudite explanation, Professor Fábio Cruzeta, it was really interesting. You presented a lot of evidence, lots of data. In fact, the Dutch, that they come after the Portuguese, the Spanish, the English, they were not discoverers, but they were very pragmatic. They were looking for trading, for spices. And after your explanations, the questions that I would like to put to you is the following. In the eyes of the author of the book, John Lewis, what you think? Did he found more differences or more similitudes between the peoples that he encountered in the Far East or in South America? What is your opinion after all? Thank you very much.
Very quick reply. The interesting thing about Neuhoff is that he's not prejudicial. Yeah. 200 years later, you have someone like Stamford Raffles writing the history of Java. And when he talks about the Javanese, by today's standards, when you actually read the history of Java, it's shocking, the language that he uses. He talks about the Javanese as a historically degenerate people who are actually going back in time and not forward, backward, childish, a childlike race, incapable of thinking scientifically. There's none of that in Neuhoff. Neuhoff's descriptions tend to be superficial because he looks at surface phenomena, but he talks about dress, customs, behavior, but not in a judgmental way. And I think there's a reason for that, Ambassador, because he's a member of the Dutch West Indies Company, which is a secular enterprise. And I think here it's important for us to understand this, yeah? To connect it with the history of Portugal. When the Dutch take over Malacca from the Portuguese, yeah, the Portuguese had built their settlement, and the Portuguese bring with them their Portuguese culture, but also their religious identity. So if you go to Malacca today, you will have the church and you have the buildings, and they're all named after Mary, Jesus, apostles, or what have you. The Dutch take over Malacca. They don't destroy the Portuguese settlements, but they rename all the buildings. So before it was Santa Maria. Now it's named after the company director. So from Santa Maria, it becomes Elon Musk. It's a different mindset because they are basically merchants. They're there to make money. It's in the charter of these companies, no missionaries. We don't want priests because we are out to make money. We don't need you coming to preach about, Jesus and poverty. We don't want to hear that. I want to retire with millions, right? So that then, I think, tells us why Neuhoff, in the way that he looks at the communities of Brazil and Java, doesn't bring with him this sort of Christian sermonizing that they're immoral savages or what have you, the way in which Columbus did, where you look at the Native Americans as being heathens. But rather he says, okay, these guys, they make good soldiers. These guys, they make good laborers. So the mindset is an economic one in that sense. And that's what he does. So it's it's a very important question because it marks, again, an important historical shift in the way in which Europeans see non-Europeans. And we are moving now into the era of modernity and early capitalism. And I think that does change things. Yeah, it does change things. So that's what you can see. It's not the kind of really vicious language that actually, ironically, comes much later. when some of these empires become very, very powerful. When the British Empire becomes really powerful in India, you see the writings of British colonial functionaries change. In the 17th century, 18th century, they see Indians with respect. They understand, okay, these people have a culture, they have a literature, they have a language, they have armies, they have navies. But after the defeat of these communities, 200 years later, the tone of the language changes. They're backward, they're savage, their religions don't make sense, they are idolaters, they don't have a religion. So that tells us something about how perceptions are also linked to power and how differentials of power change the way you look at the world, which brings us back to our discussion. Because the one thing that the South has in common is that we're in the South. And we don't have this differential of power. You don't have Southeast Asians, Africans, or South Americans bringing to the discussion centuries of inherited prejudice. We don't have this bias because we don't know each other. And that offers the possibility of perhaps a new engagement which might be original, might be different, not necessarily correct, but at least, it doesn't have that baggage. It's a new, it's a new page. It's a new book, and it's a new book. And, maybe it might have its own mistakes later on, but at least it's a new book. And that's, I think, a step in the right direction.
So one more question. We'll wrap this event.
My name is Mohsin Ali. I'm from Pakistan. I just want to ask that what can this 17th century book or travel document teach us about current global South narratives and the legacy of colonial power system? And apart from this, how can we differentiate that the Dutch colonialism and British colonialism in other part of the world?
Try to give a quick answer to that. I think when we look at two particular entities, the British East India Company and the Dutch East Indies Company, this marks a very different type of colonialism compared to, say, the Roman Empire or the Egyptian Empire or the Assyrian Empire in the past. It's all force and violence, force and violence. What Neuhoff's company does is that it brings to other parts of the world a contractual relationship. And it creates contractual societies. And this changes Asia, Africa, because our feudal systems cannot compete. Because before you are a subject of a ruler, the company says, you can actually be part of your own colonization. We offer you the opportunity to be part of your own colonization. Join us and help us colonize you. And how do you do that? I mean, again, remember, everyone talks about the British Empire, Dutch Empire, French Empire. Don't forget, if you look at the history of the British Imperial Army, many of the troops were Indians. If you look at the French colonial army in Vietnam, many of the troops were Vietnamese. How did that happen? That happened because modern colonialism provides opportunity structures for you to be part of it. So, Mohsin, your question, how is this relevant to us today? Well, when you open your Instagram account or your TikTok account, you just join a contractual society because you've agreed to sell your data to them. All of these things. This is the birth of modernity. Neuhoff didn't exist. I mean, yes, of course, he existed 300 years ago, but he could also have lived yesterday because the contractual society that he's in is the same society we're in today. And that's why this is important. It's important because it tells us that this modern form of capital-driven economics is the thing that defines the world that we live in now, right? So in that sense, I think we can learn a lot because we in a sense, you see a lot of differences, but I think if you read this closely, you'll be more struck by the similarities. And you think, actually, this is not so different from the world today. It's actually very close. Despite a 300-year gap, it's actually very close because all of us, you, me, all of us, are the products of this world. And this is a new modern world that's being created at that time. So for that reason, I think, works like this are very important for us to know where we are today.
Thanks. Perhaps there are, of course, many different kinds of lupa. in Latin America, for example, see, the independence of the Latin American countries were made by the descendants of Philip's first counts. And the independence of those countries is politically speaking, it started much earlier in Africa and I'm sorry, that's okay. And in Southeast Asia. So there are different ways of colonialism. There are different ways that colonialism affected us. I think it's very important for us to learn about it, to understand it, to study it. But personally, I think that it's also time for us to go beyond that. I think that sometimes we use colonialism as an excuse for our failures. So I think it's time for us to look ahead to see what we can do between ourselves and how we should progress. Colonialism was some time ago. Even here or in Africa, it was 60 years ago, 70 years ago that it finished. It's time for us to look beyond that, not forgetting what happened, of course.
I think just to add to that, in some ways, we live in a world shaped by colonialism. The fact that we're speaking English now is because of empire, right? Yeah, we're not speaking Arabic or Mandarin. We're speaking English, but it would be stupid to say we should not speak English either, because the basis of our international university is that it's one of the ways that we can actually internationalize. So I agree with Ambassador Prata there. That I also think that in some parts of the post-colonial world, the legacy of empire, of colonialism, has also been used to justify certain forms of really nasty ethno-nationalist politics as well, where it's very easy to just demonize the other, but then create systems that are just as oppressive. And I'm very wary of that. So I think here we are in agreement. We are the products of empire. We cannot escape that. But we are not doomed because of it either. We're not cursed by it either. And I think that's why this agency that we have now is so important. And it even starts with events like this, where we are attempting, we now are post-colonial subjects are reading a colonial text, and we are not bowing to it, and we can read it critically. That's a hugely emancipatory thing when you think about it. 100 years ago, this might not happen, but we can do it now. So I think, we should multiply initiatives like this.
So thank you very much to Mr. Ambassador and Dr. Professor Farish Ainur for facilitating the Q&A session.